time, weather, and always.
Welcome to the Chey and Pav podcast experience.
Okay, so.
You're listening to the Chey and Pav Show, Teachers Talking Teaching. We are two middle school teachers sharing our reflections and insights about the topics that matter the most in the classroom. Join us in the hallway, the parking lot, or even in the staff room. Welcome to episode 124 of the Chey and Pav Show. Thank you for joining us as we sit around the table to talk teaching. We've got a classic Chey and Pav conversation today, just the two of us, which is so long overdue, as we talk about the value of artificial intelligence, more specifically OpenAI, in the education space. We're excited to chat GPT about this new and interesting topic. But before we do, we shall introduce ourselves. My name is Pav Wander, and I make up half of this hosting team. My co-host sits to my right, and he doesn't let me introduce him. He does that all by himself.
Just the good old boys. Never. Yeah. Oh. Let me do that again.
Seriously?
What?
Okay, go. Do it again.
Not that part. The yeehaw part.
Oh.
I've never yeehawed.
I find that hard to believe.
Okay, fair. I can't. I don't think I have it in me at this age. Yeehaw! Oh, I'll be out for the next 5 minutes. You can chat GPT by yourself.
We're off to a strong start, ladies and gentlemen.
You can edit that out, right?
I'm not going to. I like that. That was funny.
Jay Falters. We keeping that.
Yeah, definitely. But it was great. I don't know that reference. Is that a song from something?
Yeah, the Dukes of Hazzard, the good old boys. We back,
okay.
but we ain't really the good old boys, so it wasn't really a smart reference, but it's, brought me to my youth, the happy place.
Yes.
We're going to watch Dukes of Hazzard and have a good time. So I guess I can be Bo and Luke Duke for this episode, but you just referencing the fact that we're back together on an episode, because, our last episode, we talked about that we have done so many interviews and then the one transitions episode that we haven't just done, our bread and butter, our wheelhouse.
That's right. We haven't done a lot of reflecting, just like our origins or where we kind of stemmed from. We haven't had one of those episodes in quite some time. So this feels different. I don't know if I remember how to do this anymore.
I certainly don't know how to interview folks. So this is better.
Yes. Well, it's been great. The interviews that we've had have been phenomenal over the last couple of weeks, and we've recorded a few that will be coming out after this episode as well. So we've got a number in the bank too. But some fantastic conversations with people that we really love to follow and learn from social media, from our own lives, people we've met along the way. So that's really great that we have the opportunity and the privilege and the honor to be able to do that. But it is really nice to just get back to our roots and chat about the things that are going on in our lives as teachers. And that's something that I feel like we haven't done in quite some time. And this is a topic that we've been hanging on to for a while. Like it's been at least 2-3 months. Like since January, I think we've been planning this episode.
I'll take care of this in the anecdote.
Okay. That's what the anecdote is for. Sorry.
That's right. I got to hit the bumper. We go to anecdotes,
Yes.
and then I'll have the anecdotes. But you were right, Pav. We've sort of been holding on to it, but there's a little bit of story to why holding on to it. Maybe we'll get to a little bit later. But not only do I feel good about us having our own little episode here, I also feel good because, not that I will dive into the negative too often because I don't want to cause you any grief. But you know what? Our community is a positive community, and it lifts us up all the time. And I think of myself, but then I think of other folks in that space as well. And the persona you put up. And it's so tough for folks to showcase or share when things don't go so well. And now I bring it back to our conversation again because we've had some rough months. So we've had some great successes with interviews and connecting with folks, but in this space of podcasting, which has also gifted us opportunities to present and share our works and be parts of other organizations and other events, February was a month that really hammered us because we couldn't seem to keep the flow. And Pav, I'm going to connect this episode with a really looking good March. And what I wanted to really talk about that for a second was just as a reminder, you never really know what folks are going through when they put on their brave faces and they have their happy smiles. I think we always just generally assume, or often we generally assume that people are doing okay. And not that we weren't doing okay, but we were hitting some, as Mike Tyson would say, everyone's got a plan until you get punched in the face. I think we got punched in the face a few times in February. And this episode, like many of our other projects, I guess. Now, I assume by this point that you're listening to this, some of the things we've worked out and have got going are sort of more public knowledge, but at the moment they're not, so I won't say it in this episode. But I do know that it sort of as the summer is coming and spring is coming, I feel a little bit of rejuvenated, and I think this episode is part of that rejuvenation, getting back into our spaces, getting back into the stuff we love to do, and I'm looking forward to rolling into March and some of these other projects we have hopefully lined up going into the end of the year.
Yeah. And sorry, did you have an anecdote or?
I do, but I want to use these fancy buttons here on the Roadcaster that does little buttons where I say, Pav, you think we wrap this up? We'll come right back with an anecdote.
I love that idea. Let's do it.
Like right now?
Well, I don't know. I don't have anything else to add.
Sure. We could use the bumper or I could sing more, Dukes of Hazzard, and I could end with an emphatic yeehaw that doesn't quite work, and I basically choke out.
Well, we've already done that, so let's go into the bumper.
Fine, sure, fair.
Get your hands up to the floor.
And you're listening to the Chey and Pav Show. Yeehaw! And we're back. And we got a little anecdote to set up this episode, Pav. Would you like to do it?
No, I don't know what you're going to say.
Do you ever?
Never. This is always a surprise to me what the anecdote is going to be.
So, of course, you did talk about that. I think, well, in the social media space, everyone was talking ChatGPT. And, we were talking about it too because we dove in to experiment and play. And we had in our minds early on, we need to do an episode about this. But then you and I started to pause for a second. And this is probably the teacher in us, wanting to be a student, wanting to learn a little more before we shifted the attention to center us and our journey in this space. And you and I started to have some conversations very quickly about how the initial buzz about the excitement really turned into almost a race, an Olympic pursuit to reposition people in education around ChatGPT. This was a fresh opportunity for people to center themselves, people to create a savior mentality, assume sort of an expert position. And you and I got a little uncomfortable. I said, I'm actually getting a little uncomfortable with how fast people are trying to position themselves as experts in something that is so new you can't possibly be an expert. And I'll tell you as a teacher, I can tell you, you're not doing this in a classroom. So why are you, this magic wave of a hand insinuating that you're doing stuff in the classroom, how it's impacting learning, but you don't know because you haven't done it. But people don't, in the heat of the moment, maybe it's not people. When people, this is why it works. This is why people position themselves quickly as the expert, because most people buy into it. They
Yeah.
don't stop. As George Carlin would say, we don't teach people how to think. And people immediately assume these people know what they're talking about. And they might know how ChatGPT works, but they certainly don't have the expertise in the space. You haven't used it in a classroom because it hasn't been around long enough for you to use it in a classroom. And we talk about all students cheating. You don't know if all students are cheating because one, you don't teach. One, you don't teach. So you don't know if they're cheating.
So yeah, so it's being used. It's a scare tactic, right? You got to scare the teachers into thinking that it's going to be used for cheating right away. And so this is how you have to get around it, and this is why you have to learn it, and this is why you have to learn it from me. And so it is a tale as old as time. This is marketing, and people are out there are always going to be doing that with any product out there. And ChatGPT is a product, and so there are people who are like, oh, this is interesting and new, and artificial intelligence is going to be the big buzzing topic. And so why don't I position myself as someone who knows a little bit, and then I can extrapolate what I know into all of these spaces where I know that there's going to be people interested. Where's the number one place that people are afraid that it's going to be used? It's in the classroom with students, with cheating, in exams, in writing essays. And so it's to me, it's not something that shocks me. And it's not even something that upsets me as much as it upsets you, because I know that this is going to happen with any product that is out there in the world. Those that can speak up the first and the loudest and say, hey, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to do this X, Y, and Z with this product, and you should listen to me because I know what I'm doing. And that happens with everything. And I know it's irritating when people don't have the lived experience or the experience in the classroom to work with the students. But I don't know, that it seems to me like that's just how it's always going to be when it comes to marketing new products.
Oh, I'm fine, by the way.
I can tell.
Pav, you summarized that brilliantly, and I'll tie both of that into our anecdote, because as I was having these side rants on this, you were talking very much in the same vein, and I even go so far as I remember people were talking about the safety issues. You have to be 18. You have to be 18. I remember looking and I said, you got to be 18 to have an email account. But we don't worry about that with anyone. And I'm not saying to dismiss it. But there's a certain, in our bureaucratic system we live in, our students, technically, they're not supposed to be in any of these spaces. If you look at
Instagram and
TikTok
TikTok and all of those places, they have age limits.
So I joked comparisons that once people tried to position themselves as experts and they didn't win the race, it was like, oh, now I'll position myself as the people telling not to use it because of safety reasons. And not that there aren't safety precautions, but if you've been in the classroom, trust me, Google search can cause all the grief you want in regards to where students can drift off to. I just found it funny. But I will now get past these anecdotal, unrandom rants to realize, how do we position our episode? We actually decided we're not releasing, we're not rushing. It's great. Folks had episodes out there 3.5 minutes after ChatGPT was out to tell you how you can manifest this in your classroom. We actually chose to wait because as teachers, there was two things we wanted to do. We wanted to dive into the space as teachers to see how it could help our teaching. And then we wanted to act as a student to see how this could benefit our learning, encourage our learning, where we could use it in our learning. And so that when we speak today, we're going to speak on things we've done and tried and used and how well it worked and when it didn't work. And I might even tell you about that moment that ChatGPT apologized to me.
Oh, yeah. That was a good situation. It was a funny story, actually.
But the rest weren't, right?
Well, the rest were just eye-opening and like really cool. Like I've been awed by the capabilities of this OpenAI system since the first time I used it. And I know that you've definitely used it a little bit more than I have and explored a little bit more. But the things that I have done using ChatGPT have been really, really cool. And I would say most of all, things that have really saved me a lot of time. Things that would take me hours and hours and hours to do, it's been able to do for me in like 15 minutes. So I would say that it's probably the number one reason that I enjoy using it, because there are things that are not like taxing intellectually, but they are taxing in a like time efficiency kind of way. And so it's like something that can save me a couple of hours. Like, absolutely, I'm going to take advantage of that and use it and make it part of my regular practice. And so I know that we'll go into some examples a little bit later, but that's probably my number one reason and my number one go-to for using it in the classroom, or you just using it in general, because I've made things like meal plans using it, which has been really, really cool to be able to do that with something like this.
I have Pav. I have such a list of things that I've dove into. Yeehaw!
Dove.
I slid face first. Got my uniform all dirty.
Yeah.
I guess I'll jump in this as a student first and foremost.
Okay.
And I tried to model myself. So as a student, how am I going to use this? How am I going to manifest things? And I did a TikTok. So of our 3 followers there, sorry for the one person that's hearing this story again. I did a TikTok, and the TikTok wasn't a TikTok per se. What I did was, I'm not a great writer, and so I use many assistive technologies. And I don't use my assistive technologies to forego doing the work. The more assistive technologies I use, I do know that eventually I start to pick up on the task. So, and I think of sort of that explicit instruction or just being privy to a certain space. So I'd use Grammarly as a small example. So who's not using Grammarly? Well, you're not, Pav, but it's good for you for paying for the subscription.
The first time was, yes, okay, I was trying it out. The second time, that was the shame on me. So I forgot to cancel my subscription.
I know you did. If only Grammarly would work twice as well for me in as a consequence of that. But I come back to the Grammarly example because Grammarly corrects, obviously, a lot of the things that made me an apprehensive, like tweeter or writer or emailer. But beyond that, it would correct a lot of things, but it would correct things so often that I started to change the way I was writing, because I wasn't just quickly accept. Okay, I'm not using a comma. I need a comma here. Okay, yes, this is a passive voice. And so my writing has got increasingly stronger because of the use of assistive technology. And I think as a teacher, we worry about this. Do students use assistive technologies merely to get to the end without actually learning along the way? And this is tough to monitor or tough to see that growth. But I made the assumption as a student that I wanted to use my assistive technologies for growth. And as a teacher, you've got to coach that up. So you can't just tell a kid, it will write it for you. We got to be open that ChatGPT can do some writing. So as a student, I'm pretty good with my vernacular. I'm not good with my yeehaws, but I'm pretty good with my vernacular. I can tell a story. As you can tell, Pav, I can rant. Mm-hmm. That's the Michael Jordan in me. Even if I didn't want to rant, I can make up a reason to rant.
Yeah, I know you can.
I took it personally. And so I made a blurb on, I'm going to say I made a blurb on how to write using ChatGPT. That's what I actually did it on. And so I spoke. I spoke. No, I take that back. It was about why teachers are not afraid of ChatGPT, right, which is another part of our anecdote we didn't get to. With you did the trying to make teachers fear and blame teachers for whatever. Maybe I'll rant in my swag bag at the end. For all our super fans that love the rant, you stick around after the music. I'll just go off for 3 minutes. But Pav, don't hold me to that. So on the assistive technology in the Google Doc, I did a voice to text. So I just spoke my mind. It created a blurb. The blurb is certainly not grammatically correct, and it's literally just taking what I'm saying. Now, if I say period, it'll add a period, but I just blurted. It was poignant. I knew my stuff. I had some emotion to it. Not that the voice to text picks up on that. I took my blurb and then I took that and I brought it back into ChatGPT and I gave it a couple of simple prompts. And Pav, I think you'll talk about this a lot, is the real need for front loading and learning how to prompt. Mm-hmm. I used some very simple prompts. I said, take this passage, organize it, summarize it, and put it into a blog. That was my only prompt. And it tidied it up and it got rid of a lot of my repetition and it gave me a blog response. Now, not level 4+. It wouldn't give it to the teacher and the teacher, whoa, wouldn't have been that. But it gave me something. It gave me two things I thought as a student, if I was receptive to using it this way. It demonstrated to me that my intellect, my thoughts were worthy and could be could be demonstrated in sort of written prose. Didn't just have to be an oral speech, although we could argue, and we've argued in many different spaces, that's actually enough. That's actually enough to be able to speak well. But let's assume that we're diving in, and let's assume that I, who's a good speaker, really wants to be a better writer. Maybe I'm just hesitant to write because I don't see successes, or I don't see how my thoughts can manifest as writing. All of a sudden, ChatGPT with those few prompts demonstrates to me that I have the thoughts, the knowledge, the desire to want to be a writer. I have the foundational pieces. ChatGPT just tidied it up for me so that I could see that I am we could argue that I am a writer, or that we could see that I am on the verge of being a confident writer. And then I took that blurb on that one front, I took it back, and because it's not necessarily a level 4++, we could talk about rubrics later, there was a space for me now to edit with purpose. Sometimes when we edit our work, it's too daunting. Pav, sometimes I get I actually became so frustrated with my voice to text that I actually just went back to writing because I couldn't handle all the edits. But ChatGPT allowed me to condense it a little bit, that made it more open to effective editing to really make it pop.
Yeah.
And so that I could go in and I could drop a few anecdotes here or there and I could review it. And all of a sudden, then when I made a few additions to my blog, I had a really solid piece of writing that I was happy about. I saw myself as a writer. And so the ChatGPT didn't just become a space to do the writing for me. If I have a student was committed to wanting to learn how to write, and as in our interview with Angela Stockman, she shared a story about her daughter. We make this assumption that students wanted to cheat. Again, the fear tactics. What if students actually do really want to learn?
Yeah.
What if they do
That's
really
right.
want to write? All of a sudden, this is breaks down barriers for students to dive into that writing
Yeah.
space. And so I gave that one example of that writing example of how it becomes sort of an assistive technology that allows me as maybe a fearful writer to start to see myself as a potential or as a writer.
Yeah, and I think that's such a valuable example to share as an anecdote. Using your own experience of using it to help you to write a piece, and that is definitely going to be a large part of the classroom. Like a lot of students, if they can see the value that this can offer in terms of being able to write better, it can definitely be very, very helpful. From my own experience, I didn't like it for the writing piece because I didn't like the lack of voice in the final product. And for me, my writing is very voice driven. And so for me to write a piece and then to go back and insert my voice into the piece would have taken me just as long as just writing it myself in the first place. So if I was lacking ideas, or if I was lacking arguments, or if I just felt like I didn't have enough information to load up my piece of writing, I might use it to help me generate ideas. And I think that that's what I have used it for the most, is generating ideas. But in terms of creating a written piece, for me, it was just too sterile. And I know that it works for you because you're able to insert those pieces in, where you're going to insert an anecdote or an example or a quote. And for you, I think that works really well, just the way that you systematically see your writing. But for me, I have a completely different vision when I envision my writing piece, my final product. And so if the voice is not in it right from the beginning, it doesn't feel right to me. And so that was my experience with it. So I likely won't go to ChatGPT to do that writing piece. And so just like what you said, many students may not like going to ChatGPT to cheat and, write that Macbeth essay or a Brave New World essay that your teacher assigns for you, because it's not coming from your voice, and it's not quite creating the product that you are aspiring to create, you know, when you have that need to share what you are actually thinking about a particular topic. So for me, that was really important. But here I am thinking about, what if there was a student that was like, no, I am going to use this tool to write my final piece, and I'm going to make it sound like it's me. Like, this is going to be just like the greatest piece of writing, and I'm going to make it sound like me. That can be done. But the amount of front loading, and you mentioned this, Chey, the amount of front loading that has to go into creating that perfect piece of writing with ChatGPT, it takes a lot of effort. And so when I say front loading, I mean the quality of the questions that you have to ask ChatGPT in order to get that product the exact way that you want it. You have to be very poignant with your questioning. You have to be very specific. The product is only going to be as good as the questions that we give it to develop those answers. And so rather than teaching in a way where you are creating a question for the students to answer that is just a simple product, you know, a simple answer that can be Googled or it can be brought up in ChatGPT, maybe what we need to be doing is teaching how to really question well and ask really good questions in the classroom. Like, how can you ask ChatGPT to create a piece of writing that you would say, that actually sounds like something I would have written about a particular topic? So I think that is a space where I would like to do a little bit more exploring. And that was a blog article that I had written, and I did not use ChatGPT to write that. I wrote that.
If you go into our Medium page, you try to tell which parts are written by ChatGPT, because I have been open that I've used these tactics. The tactics that I talked about, I've used for my professional writing.
Yep.
Pav, I want to if I can, piggyback on your front loading stuff. Poignant. And it takes a lot of iteration, and you still might not get it right, because you know that I spent a lot of time experimenting, try to get ChatGPT to write sort of the way I talk.
Right.
So I tried to get it to be humorous. I tried to get it to write with sports metaphors, and I would say, you know, write this blog, summarize this, add a few sports metaphors, and it would add a sports metaphor like every third line, no matter what it was talking about.
So it's very robotic.
This is killing me. It's killing me. My sports metaphors are nuanced and clever. And so even as you talked about that, you can. It's only as good as the questioning and the prompting. But even with that, there's still a human element that's lacking a little bit. So when you're trying to you might spend as much time trying to get ChatGPT to duplicate your style of writing, sort of as you talked about, as it's just to write.
Right. Just write your piece. Just write your thing. So I think that is probably going to be a big thing that students, you know, kind of determine on their own as they explore this space, that it's not quite the way that they want to produce it. And I know early on, you know, when they're a little bit younger, they'll just be like, this is good enough. But just like teachers can tell one student's printing from another student's printing in the class, you can tell when a student has written something and when a student has, entered a query into this OpenAI to develop an answer.
Certainly in the elementary spaces we've been in.
Yeah, for sure.
I sort of assume that there's a different beast when dealing with high school and the proficiency of writers as they age and they mature. I certainly know, Pav, breaking away from the student, that I've used ChatGPT to write emails. I was even talking with my principal and vice principal. I said, with this new MYSSC job, it's a lot more email writing. And my emails before, when I just taught, consisted of this: yes, no, maybe, or I would star the email knowing it was important, but I would never respond.
Right. Just forget about it in your starred folder.
Even if I wouldn't forget about it, I just knew it was in my starred folder.
Right.
And so I was joking. I said, when you see these long emails, rest assured, I'm not writing them.
Yes.
I'm asking ChatGPT to write me a nice message to my administration talking about what I'm doing, and then I prompt, these are the things I'm doing, and it writes it. But I was open to tell them. I know I need to email a lot more, But I do use the ChatGPT to construct my emails.
There's so much hesitation with writing particular things, right? Like I just wrote a bunch of announcements that were like, oh my gosh, I would procrastinate. I would put it off because I know it's going to be so time consuming, or it's going to be, something that just drains you of energy because you've got 100 things that you need to do, and this is very low on your priority list, but it needs to get done. And so, you toss it in there and you get like some really good quality stuff, but you have to know what you want to ask it to do.
Yeah, Pav, I know what story you're talking about. I'd love if you actually shared it with the audience. So you're part of the Sikh Heritage team at our board. Yeah. And you are creating some content. And now on the big picture, you're creating a series, not your team, and you're part of it, creating a podcast series. Yep. And then to complement this, you cut in and take over.
So part of every Heritage Month, there's a team that will create morning announcements that students can read for every day of the month. And if they would like to include some data, some statistics, some interesting facts, some knowledge about prominent individuals of that faith in Canadian or, world history or present day. So a friend of mine and a fellow colleague, we decided to work on the announcements for Sikh Heritage Month together. And so she did a lot of the front end work, and she created she created a template. She created a big number of the announcements that was going in there. And she was nice enough to create a list of prominent Sikh individuals that we could write little facts about. Well, I shouldn't say because, it still takes a little bit of effort to be able to do this work. But I asked ChatGPT to just write me a short paragraph about each person. And then that's the fact. That's the announcement. That's the short little bio that will be available to read, and it's concise and it contains the important information. I did have to go in and do a little bit of editing with everyone, making sure that I highlighted certain facts. One of them was about an individual that had passed away, but it was written in the present tense and did not include that the person had recently died. And so I let ChatGPT know that this person is now dead. Can you rewrite this in the past tense and also include their date of death? And I didn't tell it what the date of death was. I just said this person is now dead. And then it rewrote the paragraph for me and included the death date and the actual death date, and also changed the tense to the past tense. And so a lot of these iterative things I've been able to do with ChatGPT. I've asked it to create a rubric for me, but the rubric is not like in a 4-point manner, or it's not using the verbiage that I would like it to use. And so I've asked it, can you recreate this for me? Firstly, can you put it in a table? Can you, make it more descriptive? Can you include X, Y, and Z in this rubric? And it's been able to do that, which is really helpful because you can really tailor your product to what you are specifically looking for and what is going to make your practice better. And so, to go back to the story, so I've used it to write morning announcements, which is something that would have taken me hours to be able to do.
I know there's 3 teachers that are saying, this is a great opportunity for your students to learn how to write announcements. Yes. But, and
it's probably more than 3 teachers.
And as Tony Kornheiser would say, there's always a but. When you're thinking about it on a grand scale and you're trying to create a space that allows space for flow and growth, having some foundational pieces are important. So the responsibility as an announcer is to be able to produce something that you can get out to schools ahead of time. And if you don't know our board is the 3rd biggest in North America. So it's not 3 schools and 7 teachers. It's a little bigger than that. So there's a space to sort of be teacher-led or committee-led to produce this content. I know on an off scale, we always love student choice and voice and involvement. But, as you and I have talked, if you just can't, there are scaffolding and moments for this, and there's times when it's not. And so if your response immediately listen to that anecdote, well, students should be doing this. Yes. But not all the time. Not all the time, especially when you're at a committee trying to provide for others, because part of producing content for people is to produce content for people.
Yeah.
Not just say, I produce ideas for you to produce content.
Yeah.
Providing these provides, again, similar to the writing activity, provides an opportunity for people to expand, use, not use, but as a role in a board-wide committee, it provided a way for you to produce content that frees you up to be able to do some of the more nuanced, high-skill work, like coming back to the podcast, creating a mini-series podcast. That is high-end work.
And that is work that has taken up a lot of time, and that is absolutely 100% student-driven, student-run. There's a student voice in there, and I would say that is where I would like to lend all of my time and my energy, because that is something that I feel like the students are really taking away from, rather than having them sit in front of a screen and Google who the person is and then copying a paragraph onto a slide deck. I would say that most of the scaffolding from that piece about the announcements is going to come from when the students are reading the announcements aloud and they are pronouncing the concepts and the ideas correctly. And so that is, I would say, where the most important scaffolding will need to come from.
Okay, so now I've got announcement checked off, and then I want to come back because you started to rush into rubrics.
Sorry.
And assessments.
That was
and
on your
feedback. And I'm not sure exactly where to jump in, but I'll start in with, a story.
Oh, yeah.
As my daughter mocks my latest episode video, you want to start a podcast? Stop, she says. Stop. It's not a hard software. It's not a hardware. It's a book. I was like, be quiet.
Oh, she's actually mimicking you.
Yeah, she mimics it because she's like, oh, I'm going to start a podcast.
She and I need to have an episode together.
Good time. Yes. And I talk about this because it's a story. And so in part of what our MYSSC rules is, we really get to sit down with teachers. We get to curate time that we can sit and plan. And this is something teachers don't get a lot of. They're always expected to plan on their own time. I think one of the things we love about this job is that we can ask administrators, hey, I want a day to work with this teacher to plan something robust, significant, ownership, so that they're not just grabbing a resource that sort of creates a disconnect. And I bring this up because we were planning a lesson in a unit, and it's sort of an expansion of your unit. In one of the grade 7 classes I'm working with, we're creating a podcast around my name, inspired by your podcast, which hasn't been a podcast that I have personally made yet, but we went into your unit, and then we started to build it and expand it. And some of our good pedagogies that we've learned is that assessments can't be afterthoughts. Rubrics can't be afterthoughts. Feedback moments or anticipation can't be afterthoughts. We learned a lot of that from Tom Schimmer, that these got to be part of your planning. And as a young teacher myself, or maybe even as an older teacher, these were always secondary thoughts.
Right.
And I sort of realized that partially they're secondary because they're time consuming. And I highlight this because when we brought it up to this group, we were talking about, let's build the rubric. The teachers I was working with, they got frustrated, not negative frustrated, but they started to share stories of working on rubrics for hours and days and trying to get the formatting to work. And I said, no, let me show you something. And so we took all our criteria and our talking points. And again, Pav, it comes to front loading. You can get a really vibrant, on the point rubric, as long as you've planned ahead of time to know what it is you're trying to teach and what you're trying to manifest in learning. You put those in. I'm teaching this, provide a rubric, provide a grading scale, whatever vernacular you want to use. And it just rolled right out. And the two teachers they stopped.
Yeah.
And I said, one of your anxiety points is the time it takes to make a rubric. And it's not that you don't know what you want to grade. It's the wording, it's the vernacular, it's getting it right. ChatGPT, because we had done that planning, was able to produce multiple rubrics that we could curate to our content. And all of a sudden, it alleviated the stress. And all of a sudden, now the rubric was part of the teaching. So when you were introducing our unit, we could showcase some of these rubrics. Now we know great teaching might deviate and we might change. And then, Pav, you can jump in, but then I would extend, because I spent a lot of time practicing with ChatGPT how it could mark, how it could provide feedback for some of the work. So I went in December and January, and I was taking essays that my students had written in October. I hope they wrote them. Maybe they just cheated and ChatGPT wrote them. But at the time, I already had my expectations and my rubrics and my plans. So I did two things. I brought in my rubric into ChatGPT. I said, with this assessment, with these criteria, mark this. And I dropped the student's essay in. And it marked it. and it marked it very accurately. Almost not identical, but within the same 1, 2, 3, 4s that I had given when I had marked, it had marked. And then I did something different. I went into ChatGPT and I told it, I did this assignment, create a marking scheme for it.
Oh,
And
so
then-
you went backwards.
Yeah, and then it
Okay.
did it. It created a marking scheme. Then I went again. I said, using this marking scheme, and then please add some feedback around vocabulary, something you really liked about their writing to encourage them to continue to writing. And then I had a third prompt on a feedback piece, something to work on. It was a specific topic to assess. It was a comment to encourage their writing, and it was just a general feedback comment. And again, it graded it, and then it gave the feedback, and it gave this, and it gave that, and astutely, very accurately to what I had given it. And so all of a sudden, your ChatGPT can be a space to mark. And you and I had a conversation that a lot of time parents want to challenge teachers' marking, and they want to make it an emotional argument. And I said, there's actually a space here where when perhaps a parent, we're not necessarily going to say they're wrong, but I'm going to land on the side that most teachers actually are pretty comfortable and pretty competent with their marking, that they can shift away from bias when it comes to marking. I don't want to say they don't, but I also don't want to just assume they do either. But I said there's a space here where you can be unemotional in marking. You can be, now to assume that ChatGPT doesn't have bias is probably erroneous. I just haven't discovered it yet myself. I'm sure it has it, but maybe the bias we sort of assume teachers might have, it doesn't have. It creates a space where you can, when we talk about moderated marking, you could moderate mark here instantly.
Yeah.
And so I've had some good experience getting ChatGPT to mark student essays. 1, using the criteria I had given it. Then 1 or 2, creating its own criteria based on the task. And then I asked it to give pertinent feedback. Asked it to give encouraging next steps. And those comments were effective. And those comments were on the mark. Were they outstanding? No. But when we talk about giving feedback, we know feedback's key, but it's time consuming. So if ChatGPT can provide, if you can ask to give it a specific bit of feedback and it works, and then you can give it back for students to act upon it, all of a sudden it frees teaching up for other stuff. Not that this stuff's not important, but you don't necessarily have to give every student feedback yourself every single time.
Yeah.
You can use this space. So I've seen goodness
Yeah.
in the rubric, assessment, and feedback components.
And that's an area that I haven't toyed with as much. I haven't really played with that, and I'd really like to dive into it. I assume that some of the areas that you have to work through in that area, in that realm, is again kind of like the voice. Like, is this something that I would actually tell my student? But absolutely 100%, it is removing that bias from the teacher. But again, if you know that student and you know what that student has progressed towards, and that student has made gains in a particular area, then receiving maybe some of this feedback could be a bit of a deterrent for that student if they have been making small changes over time. So again, as the classroom teacher, you'd probably need to review that feedback before you deliver it to the student to say, is this the type of feedback that is going to deter them from continuing to work? Maybe I don't want to bring up all of these points. Maybe I choose 1 or 2 things that the student can continue to work on at the moment. Just to make sure that they stay on it and they stay in that upward trajectory, rather than saying, oh, this is way too much. And it's not quite the way the teacher would tell me to continue my improvement.
As you're talking, Pav, it gives me an idea of something I haven't done yet. But again, using ChatGPT as assistive technology, could you as a writer learn how to prompt ChatGPT to look for things you want it to look for?
Yeah.
So when we talk about peer feedback, it could become your peer feedback space.
Right.
Now, I just said this is an idea, and now this goes right to my rant, because I'm going to pretend. Now everyone just assumes I've done it before because I've said it. But I'm now officially saying I've never actually done that.
Yeah.
I just, in an inspiration of what Pav was saying, a manifestation, right, this could, one of your peer reviewing or feedback buddies could be ChatGPT.
Yeah.
Chat, whatever it is.
ChatGPT, yes.
Chat AI.
Yeah, you could use that too.
No one will call me an
OpenAI.
expert calling it that. What do
But
you got?
yeah,
What else you want to talk
absolutely.
about?
I think We've talked a lot about the ways that we have used it, either, to help out students or to improve upon our own practice in the classroom, to streamline, compressing large amounts of information to a few paragraphs, maybe leveling texts. That's an idea that I have that I haven't tried yet, but taking a piece of text and saying, okay, now write this for a grade 4 student or a grade 5 student. That's something that I'd like to try. And something that I think that would be very helpful, that if it works really well. I know that I have used it to compress text. Like I've put in like 3 or 4 paragraphs, and can you compress this to 1 paragraph?
Yeah.
So that's something that I like to try. Some other ways that I'd like to use it is as a conversation partner for students, so they can learn how to dialogue, because it does mimic conversation. And so you could practice having a chat with it to get better at having discussions, or maybe even get better at debating or roundtable discussions as we practice getting ready for, podcasts in the classroom. Like, how would you have a discussion with a person? So you could type out or use talk to text to kind of say what you would say in a podcast episode, and how would the other person respond. So you could kind of mimic conversation through it. You could generate some dialogue that you could use in a story. And then again, I have assist with writing, just in very much in the ways that we've already talked about. So I have some ideas. I have some things that I want to try. There are some things that I've recently done with it that I found to be very helpful. I've used it to develop lessons, which I thought was great. Yeah. So
What book was it? I can't remember the book where you were showing me the book, and then like 15 minutes later you started showing me all these vocabulary lessons built. Tell me a little bit about that.
So the book that I had was Beatrice and Croc Harry by Lawrence Hill, and it's a very word driven book. And we were in what was the
Right to Read? It was the Right to Read workshop.
Yeah, it was the Right to Read, but it was I don't know. I can't think of the name of the workshop itself, but it was reading strategies and helping students with, the basics of reading.
Word pronunciation.
Yeah, it was just development on all of that areas. And so we did a lot of phonemic awareness and phonology, and we learned about morphology. And as I'm working through this workshop, I'm thinking of the grade 7 and 8 students that I'm working with, and how can we make it practical, and how can we use it with the books that we are already reading. And Beatrice and Croc Harry, if you haven't read, it's a phenomenal book, very word driven. Lawrence Hill is a lover of words, and so he uses some really great ones and even makes up many words in this book as well. And so I thought it would be a perfect book to develop a word study unit or a mini unit through. So I just, while we were sitting there in the workshop, I just had ChatGPT develop a word study mini unit using words from the actual book.
But you didn't need to put the words into it. It already had them.
It pulled the words from the story. And so that's something that I didn't know it could do. I didn't know that it had read the texts, and so or had access to the text be able to do that.
I think technically it has not had it does not access the internet. It is just people have spoken about it openly enough that it's picked up.
I guess
it's language based is my understanding.
How it works
in its infancy stage.
Yeah, I guess so. So
this is why I'm gonna cut. Sorry, Pav, I'm cutting you off. This is why when you talked about when you're talking those biographies about that individual had passed away, it was recent. Its use of language is not up to date.
Right.
So anything that's really recent, it's sort of, this is where there's holes in ChatGPT, because it doesn't access information from the internet like that.
Yeah.
It's understanding of mastery of language.
Right. So yeah, I don't quite know how it works, but it's a mystery that I will gladly just accept as mystery.
Sorry, are you talking about Chat AI, or are you talking about my language lessons? It's a mystery how it works. Like I look at it, I don't quite get it, but it seems to come up with something good at the end.
Yeah, no, but I've used it to develop morphology mini lessons and units in the past as well. Like a couple of months ago, I developed like a four lesson mini unit on on different word morphology. So prefixes and suffixes, compound words, and then conversions, word conversions. And so that was really like, I was like just blown away by what it could produce there. And so when I created this lesson, this little mini unit using words from the actual story, I was like, this is amazing, because now you can really tailor your lessons to the exact book that you're reading and not make it very abstract, because I'd like to use words that are related to things that we are currently doing. So I can see myself doing this for math units, right? Using the vocabulary words that are so important in math that we want to make sure that students are aware of and learning beforehand, and we can apply the same morphology strategies and do that same word work in math as well, or social studies or science, or whichever unit we might be, or any area of the curriculum that we are currently working. So that to me was a big one. And word study is something that I haven't really done in my own teaching. I did in the very beginning when I was, everybody was doing those spelling lists, and then you were practicing all kinds of things.
The efficiency that it curates the words for you pertinent to the books you're doing.
That's right.
Is it's the teachers don't have the planning time to do it all themselves. Yep. And when you're working with a certain book, it's not like every school purchases every teacher's guide for every book imaginable. And so there is, I guess, a pressure, maybe it's the wrong word, for teachers to want to build their own content, or a desire for teachers that they want to build their own content. So you just can't do it everywhere. And
Right.
It allows you to sort of expand and extend the learning for stuff that you're comfortable with by knowing what you could add on. And again, it comes down to, you have to have some foundational knowledge to know where you could extend and expand.
In my role as a MYSSC, I've experienced a little bit of hesitation in trying new books. So that's an area where I would recommend a couple of new books, and then there would be a little bit of, it's not like they don't want to do it, but it's like a little hesitation because, well, I have this book and I've done it many times, and I have all of the stuff that I need to teach this book. And I just feel like there's a missed opportunity there to take a look at all of these new fantastic books that are available to us that might be a little bit more better suited for our diverse classrooms, and an opportunity to use one of them and really build something wonderful through there. And ChatGPT really offers an opportunity to build some units or build some of those lessons that you might be apprehensive about because you don't have the teacher's guide to go with it. And so I think it eliminates that hesitation. For me, at least, I would be much more comfortable starting a book that I haven't even read yet, but I know and I've heard from other teachers that this is a great one to use with students, and it, take the recommendation and just sort of trust that it'll be great, and build something in the moment.
Coupling a new book with a bunch of different activities that maybe they haven't been doing, it becomes a little bit more, maybe more exciting or inviting.
Yeah.
Pav, I've got a few more on my list. We've already almost been talking for an hour without a commercial break, no sponsor. So please send us nickels and dimes because we haven't anyone pay for this episode. Anecdotes or learning to do annotation. I've never done a lot of annotation in my teaching, and ChatGPT liberated me to be able to do something because I was able to curate very short pieces on very specific topics and then quickly screenshot them, put them to a Jamboard, and then provide space for annotating documents related to very specific. So I did an annotation activity on rotations in math.
Yeah.
Where I know I probably could have just annotated, the math textbook, but the math textbook has all kinds of other things. ChatGPT just gave me just a passage.
Yeah.
I screenshot it, put it in a Jamboard. I put a particular thing we were going to annotate and go through there. And I've had some great successes similar to your novel, your word studies, that a lot of the classes I'm going into, they aren't annotating things either explicitly. And I think a lot of it's not even hesitancy. It's about having really accessible clips that allow us to do it. And so I've done some annotation on math rotations. I've done some annotation on podcasts. And what I had done is I just put in looking for a prompt to give me a quick blurb, and I took just literally screenshot, put it in a Jamboard, and then I had 3 different expectations to get students, one, to get used to using the tools in Jamboard to annotate, so they were circling and straight line and highlighting, pulling out vocabulary, pulling out key ideas, dropping in images in certain place, and so was able to teach annotation quickly and really poignantly with the topics they were working on. So I used it with that recently multiple times in class with a high level of success.
That's awesome.
Do you want to jump in? I got a few other ones I've done here.
No, go for it.
Making quizzes.
Oh, yes. I've done that too.
Multiple times I've made quizzes that I've been able to put into Google Forms. So I did on my math annotation activity. I then made, not for it to be a quiz to be graded, but then I turned it into a Google Form quiz afterwards just to practice how quickly now I could make a quiz out of it. And so I used the same passage. I said, from this passage, create 6 multiple choice questions and provide the answers. Gave it to me. I put them into Google Form. And that way, when they were done annotating, we could go back to there to now see if through the annotation, do they actually extract some of the information. Another one, I put our story in, the magnificent microphone.
Yep.
For all of you that have purchased, rated, and reviewed, mwah, j'adore.
Chef's kiss.
Put the story in, and I asked them to make, again, 20 multiple choice questions that would answer. So, and then I put them into a Kahoot. Now, I had some troubles with it because sometimes your ChatGPT times out. So it doesn't finish its idea. So it's like stops at like 15.
Yeah.
And then I push continue once, and it continued making random questions about Jack and Jill.
Who's Jack and Jill?
I said, what are you doing? We were in such a good flow. And I tried to reconnect it. And then so I had to go back and I redid
it. It just randomly went to Jack and Jill?
Yeah, because my prompt wasn't, I've practiced a few times doing writing responses, and it generates and it stops. And I just push in continue, and it will continue its thought.
Okay.
And so when it made the questions for the magnificent microphone, it stopped at 16. So I just typed continue. So it did continue making multiple choice questions, but it no longer was doing it on the magnificent microphone.
Oh, I see.
It just picked up. So it had, I believe it was Jack and Jill. It was Jack and Jill questions, and I was like, what is going on here? So then I had to go back and prompt, and then say I wanted 20 questions that covered the basis of the entire story, because it was going to run out of 20 like halfway through the book. But I was able to turn that quickly into content. So in this case, in your examples, Pav, you had it was able to find the stories in the World Wide Web. The magnificent microphone, believe it or not, it hasn't heard of it.
Hasn't read it.
I was a little irate. My computer nearly went in the garbage.
Yeah.
In response, but I put the actual story right into ChatGPT and asked it to make the questions, and it made the questions from there. And so able to make quick quizzes, and they're not that Kahoots are the be-all, end-all. Certainly if you're driving innovation, you're not using a Kahoot, but as supplementary material, we all know that a fun Kahoot to go with a story is one of your many things. If you can make it quickly and efficiently, why not?
Why not? Exactly. Include it.
Can I cut me off any time? I devised a magnificent microphone loose parts, because I know nothing about loose parts as a middle school teacher. So it devised a lesson plan for the magnificent microphone for loose parts. So all our kindergarten fans, one of you, because we teach middle school, got a loose parts activity coming for you. One more, Pav? Come on, one more. Last
one.
What? You stop me.
I need to stand up.
Your back is getting sore.
Yeah.
We need comfier chairs in the studio.
Yes,
in the kitchen.
Agreed.
Templates, quick templates. So, we do a lot of podcasting work, but our experience isn't not with every single podcast. So with one grade 6 class I work with, they're working on a science podcast. I've never built a science podcast in flight. And so the grade 6 is new to podcasting, new to the flight. They needed more scaffolding and molding, but I didn't have it right at the tip of my to know. I asked ChatGPT to make me a podcasting template for a grade 6 class that is learning about flight. Template. Not the world. You don't get a great podcast because you have a template, but it provided me a quick template, very specific. So although I was comfortable in podcasting, how could I support grade 6s that were new to podcasting and new to flight to frame where they're podcast? And it was able to give me quick template to work around, to build with.
Those are some great ideas. You've done a lot of really great things, trying it out and testing it out and seeing where it can help out in the classroom. I know it definitely has streamlined my teaching practice and my ability to assist teachers in creating some great content for them to use in the classroom as well. And I say that if it helps you do your job a little bit better, then you got to use it.
Of course.
That's my 100%. Bottom line. Yeah.
Why do you think I shave all my softball bats?
Don't
test
tell-
them. Don't test them. Don't shoot middle. Don't shoot middle. Don't hit the ball at the pitcher, and no one will ask to check the skinny guy's bat.
Yeah. Perfect. Is it time for a break?
We can wrap up if you want. Like,
Okay,
we've been going
let's
an
do
hour.
that.
Like this is the problem with not having done an episode in so long.
I think it might be time for a swag bag.
Swag bag for sure.
Yeah.
Let's see if I still know where the button is.
Okay.
Don't worry, I can push people's buttons. I never lose that skill.
We know that.
Da, da, da. Oh, there's the music. Get in there. Our swag bag today is, Pav, we'll come back to my rant. Don't rush to be first or loudest when something new is around. Pause. Explore. Think. You don't necessarily want to position yourself as an expert, I guess, when teaching. We just want to position ourselves as competent, confident, and willing to learn and grow. And so when I think about this episode, is this going to be the best episode for talking about ChatGPT that you can find out there? Probably not. We probably don't have every idea imaginable, but I can attest and tell you this, other than the few times where I said we haven't done this, we're thinking about it, we've done these things.
Yeah.
We see where they work. We see how sort of you have to work your teaching around them. And so when we bow down to simple narratives that teachers are afraid or that students are all cheating, we have really bowed down to low resolution talking points. And I ponder who's looking to benefit from those talking points because they seem erroneous to me. And so when we dive into new spaces, pause, practice, position yourself as teacher, position yourself as a student, mentor, and see how it works. And then bring these things to, we talk about courageous conversation. Well, we need to be as equally courageous with our technologies in our learning spaces. And this has been episode 124 of the Chey and Pav Show, finally getting into the ChatGPT ring. Not first, not loudest, but hey, I think authentic.
Yeah, definitely authentic. And thank you, Chey, for revisiting that anecdote from the beginning, or I guess our reason for the rant. But we also wanted to throw out there, we've given you lots of great ideas, that things that we have tried in the classrooms. If you've used something that you'd like to share, please let us know either in the social media space or shoot us an email at info@cheyandpav.com. We'd love to hear what you've done in the classroom using OpenAI or ChatGPT. Yeah, I'm always looking to learn some new ideas, so thank you.
Make
for
sure to check
sharing.
out our website, cheyandpav.com. Subscribe to our newsletter, rate and review. Tell all your friends. Tell them now. I'll wait. I'm waiting. Tell them. Look over to them. Tell them. No,
Okay.
don't.
I think they get.
Don't
it.
accept that as an answer. You tell them again. Can't wait to see you next time, folks. If you stick
Thank you
around,
for joining us.
maybe I'll rant.
Please don't.
Yee-haw! Are you still here? I told you I'd be back. And don't worry, Pav's not here. We could rant a little bit. but really I don't rant. But thank you for joining the Chey and Pav Show, episode 124. And if you stuck around, well, don't forget to enter our raffle for our wipe book giveaway that we had last week at whitebook.com/Chey and Pav. Use the code, people. And for all my ranting on ChatGPT, you know what? This is the Michael Jordan space. I just love to rant. I get fired up. People often talk, don't take teaching personally. Don't take it personally. Oh, I love to take it personally. I want it to be personal. That doesn't necessarily mean I get it right all the time, but I love to fire up the emotions. Oh, wait, shh, Pav's coming. Hold on. Let me put the music back on.